All right. Today I'm doing something a little bit more spontaneous because on November 15th of 2023, the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission in the United States, enacted a 3-2 vote in favor of adopting new anti-digital discrimination policies. And the entire thing is a political powder keg because one side will claim that this is an unprecedented advancement of civil rights equality, while the other side claims it is an unparalleled power grab that tramples freedom of speech and free market capitalism. Me? I honestly have no idea what to think about it right now, so I wanted to take some time and discuss everything that's happened. First things first, this is a report right here from the FCC on the new initiative clarifying the definition of digital discrimination under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act of 2021. And what's laid out here in this report is what was adopted in the November 15th vote. It's very long. There's a lot here. I won't read it all, obviously, because that would take hours. And most of it is generally uninteresting, except for a couple of key items. For starters, in order to enforce equal access, the FCC requires regulatory authority now over the following aspects of business executed by ISPs, Internet Service Providers. Quote, network infrastructure deployment, network reliability, network upgrades, network maintenance, customer premises equipment and installation, as well as non-technical terms and conditions of service, such as policies and practices regarding contractual terms generally, mandatory arbitration clauses, pricing, deposits, discounts, customer service, language options, and credit, end quote. From my understanding, that means they have regulatory authority over basically everything that these companies do now for the purpose of preventing, investigating, or mitigating digital discrimination, which is kind of intense. But we're not done. Down on page 103, there are additional aspects of internet service that the government would now seemingly regulate under these new rules, reading, quote, deployment of broadband infrastructure, network upgrades, and network maintenance, service quality components and the terms and conditions on which broadband internet access service is provided, included but not limited to speeds, capacities, latency, data caps, throttling, pricing, promotional rates, imposition of late fees, opportunity for equipment rental, installation time, contract renewal terms, service termination terms, and use of customer credit and account history, marketing, advertisement, and outreach, technical service, on-site service, and other provision of customer service, end quote. Yes, that is extremely boring to read and doesn't sound like much without further context, but the short form summary is that this is an unbelievable amount of governmental authority over ISPs for the purpose of preventing discrimination and connecting all Americans. Now, honestly, that's a pretty low bar. You won't find many people out there who disagree with the idea that access to high-speed internet is a good thing, nor would they dispute the fact that private companies choosing to willfully discriminate on the basis of racial characteristics, for example, or ethnicity is a bad thing. But this is where things get really strange, because I can't seem to find any indication that such discrimination is actually happening, nor can I find consistent messaging on the topic with regards to how many Americans were or are living without access to high-speed internet in the first place. See, the US government is, and has been for quite some time, subsidizing development of broadband infrastructure in low-income areas in an effort to close the digital divide, so to speak, through the BEAD, B-E-A-D, Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. $42 billion was just recently allocated by the current administration for increasing availability of high-speed internet. The Affordable Connectivity Program works on a monthly basis to lower the cost of high-speed internet for individual households, and things like the Reconnect Loan and Grant Program focus on lending for the explicit purpose of high-speed internet in rural areas, plus a whole bunch more money that gets systematically poured into this goal, but you get the point. Good, bad, neutral. My purpose here isn't to debate policy. My purpose is to show the full scope of what's happening. And here's the part that really confused me. After Congress implemented the Broadband Data Act of 2020, the FCC themselves estimated in 2021 that 99.2% of Americans had access to at least one high-speed internet provider. When you up that number to 3, requiring 3 separate ISPs in the same area, the number was 97%. And this followed the standard guidelines of 25 megabits down, 3 megabits up. Now, when changing those guidelines to 100 megabits down, which they thought about doing periodically, that percentage radically drops. But if you consider that 25 megabits is already sufficient for online video games, video streaming, and not blazing fast file downloads, of course, but certainly passable ones, it starts to get a little confusing. Why? This is why. Right after the FCC vote took place, Vice President Kamala Harris made a public statement which reads, quote, every person in America should be able to access affordable high-speed internet no matter where they live or how much they earn. when President Joe Biden and I took office, 30 million people across our country did not have access to high-speed internet. Communities of color, Native communities, rural communities, and low-income households were disproportionately disconnected, end quote. Well, that's noble, isn't it? Of course, but hang on, because according to the 8th Broadband Progress Report of 2012, over 10 years ago, that's over a decade, by the FCC, 19 million Americans were living without broadband access at threshold speeds. Meanwhile, Forbes is over here reporting that 42 million Americans have no access to broadband services in 2023, which is quite a bit higher than Kamala Harris's estimate of 30 million. So what's the story here? Has America systematically increased the number of people who don't have access to broadband internet since 2012, over a decade ago? Despite pouring, $100 billion or so into various different programs to increase the number of people that have access? Why is it that, according to the National Telecommunications and Information Administration in 2021, there were supposedly 24 million households without broadband internet, and yet 58% of them, north of 12 million households, expressed no desire or need to be online? Well, that's strange, because if you consider that average household size in America, despite plummeting dramatically since 1960, is still above 2.5 per, that means 30 million Americans have expressed no desire or need to be online, while actually something like well over 50 million Americans would be without internet in that particular estimation, which is, again, wildly different. But anyway, 30 million express no desire or need to be online, which is the first time the numbers have even remotely aligned, and would basically mean that Kamala Harris is claiming that 30 million Americans don't have access to high-speed internet, shortly after 30 million Americans claim that they don't need or want internet access. My point here isn't to hold up any particular set of statistics and say some sort of gotcha line on the reality of internet adoption in the United States. According to the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation, 98% of Americans have access to a fixed connection at broadband speeds, and the list goes on, and none of them are even remotely similar. My point is to show that it's fucking gibberish, okay? That's really the point. Every single agency, authority, or data collection firm out there projects not just different, but wildly different numbers. The White House puts out statements about high-speed internet being a human right, while posting claims that would mean that the number of connected Americans just randomly fluctuates constantly by tens of millions of people, and all of it is used as a justification for some of the largest governmental market intervention tactics that I've seen in recent memory. Why? I have no idea why. I know that the new FCC vote gives sweeping regulatory power over the internet to governmental authorities investigating whether or not internet service providers discriminate in their business practices, but I don't know how it will be used. I know that pretty much every single claim out there about broadband internet access in the United States contradicts each other, but I don't know what the real numbers actually are. And I know that the government is systematically gaining more power every single day, but I can't tell you what they are actually going to do with that authority because I don't have a crystal ball. If I were forced to give an opinion here, which I'm not, but I'm going to do it anyway, none of this makes any sense to me unless I look at it as a foot in the door type situation. When you talk about internet equity or digital discrimination, while a bevy of programs exist, tens of billions of dollars in subsidies get funneled into that goal, and wildly contradictory stats on who is even affected by all of it or how many of them there are omnipresent, it gets really difficult for me to see the goalposts. What is the actual purpose here? If no one even agrees on the basic foundation, why would a regulatory body seek so much control over the internet? Yeah, help people, sure, of course, anti-racism, etc., etc. But if a broadband company can already get massive subsidies for building in certain communities, which they do, and the coverage is massively increasing through new technologies like Starlink, which it is, what could be the real purpose behind a sweeping authority over the internet other than information control? Call me a conspiracy theorist, sure, fine, but I see no other reasonable explanation here other than a foot in the door to have some sort of premise in place so that the US government has the option of exerting pressure or control on the availability of information. Think of it like the terms of service documents that we all click through before accessing an application, and most of us don't read. We all know that those terms are massively far-reaching, covering specific legal situations that most of us don't even think about, and a lot of it never gets used, ever, because it's only there for the what-if scenarios, just in case, to cover the ass of a giant corporation. But I catch myself thinking about this the exact same way. Enact some sort of massively overreaching anti-discrimination framework, and then later down the line, if you need to, there's something there that you can point to and say, hey, look, we're justified in doing this thing right now because that rule way back over there says we are. Obviously, I don't know for a fact, but that's what my gut tells me. In the end, all I know is that it makes absolutely no sense and will likely become a political powder keg. One side will claim it's the foundation for 1984, and the other side will claim that they have to do it because America is super racist. They're both Muppets. That's it. If you want to support the channel, check out the links down below. There is a VPN affiliate link with a massive discount, monthly memberships, Patreon, locals, channel memberships here on YouTube, etc. A new merchandise line coming soon, and more, but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching. Question everything, and have a nice night.